society burglar strikes again. A series of burglaries. 6 over the period from June 2nd to June 17th. On July 2nd, the 7th occurred at the home of Sir Sanford Leeds. Cleopatra tiara stolen, it says. As in the other cases, no sign of extensive search by the thief, and only one piece of jewelry involved. Victims elsewhere at the time. Here's a complete list of the particulars, Holmes, if you'd care to read it.
I believe you'll find them in the study.
How do you do, gentlemen? I am Gerald Locke.
Please be seated, Mr. Locke. How can we be of service?
3 days ago, Guy Clarendon was found murdered at Halliday's. It's preposterous, but Miss Frances Nolan has been charged and is being detained at the criminal court, Old Bailey.
Frances Nolan. Ah, yes. Sister of Loretta Nolan. Only surviving heirs of Sir Malcolm Nolan, founder of the Aberdeen Navigation Company.
I seem to recall that Sir Malcolm and Lady Nolan were killed when some lunatic threw a bomb into their carriage. It seems to me that later I heard something about it being a case of mistaken identity. Wasn't one of their little offspring in the carriage with them at the time?
Yes, it was Loretta, Frances's sister. She was only 4. Miraculously, she was uninjured.
Mr. Locke, I've heard that you are a suitor for Miss Frances Nolan's hand, are you not?
Yes.
And was it not also true that she was being courted by Guy Clarendon?
Unfortunately, yes.
Have you any idea why Frances Nolan was charged with the crime?
Well, she was discovered over the body with a pistol in her hand. That would do it. But you don't understand. Frances is totally incapable of murder, not even of a scoundrel such as Guy Clarendon.
Scoundrel? But he's from such blue blood. Also, if I'm not mistaken, he's an accomplished batsman for the West London Cricketers, a ranked fencer in international competition.
He was also a bit of a bounder, Watson.
What an understatement. Guy Clarendon was excessively fond of cards and strong drink. His father had all but disinherited him. I tried to tell Frances that Clarendon was no good, but to no avail. And now look at the mess she's in. Will you help?
Most certainly.
I understand that Wilfred Robards is considering taking Miss Nolan's case. He might be able to help you. If you'd like, I can arrange an interview with Frances Nolan. She's being held downstairs, you know.
We might be able to help you, Miss Nolan, if you could just remember what happened that night in Mr. Clarendon's room.
Well, that's just the trouble. I can't remember anything except seeing Guy's body across the room and the pistol in my hand.
Where did you get the pistol?
I've no idea, though the police assure me it's mine. I didn't know Guy was at Halliday's. I've never even been there before. And why would I shoot him anyway? We loved each other.
There, Miss Nolan. Stiff upper lip.
Thank you.
Miss Nolan, what is the last thing you remember before the room at Halliday's?
Oh, hot cocoa in bed.
I beg your pardon?
Well, every night before I retire, my maid, Grace, brings me a cup of hot cocoa.
How nice.
Yes.
And before that?
Well, before that, I dine with Dr. Trevelyan, as I do every Sunday evening. My sister Loretta is under his care. The doctor and I have become good friends over the years. He left at 10 o'clock, as he always does.
May I ask, where did you first meet Guy Clarendon?
At the country estate of Cornelius Oldwine, in March. My sister Loretta was attending a party there. I suppose things got a bit out of hand because it seems she dived into a fountain. She caught pneumonia and I had to go and fetch her home. Guy was also at the estate, and that's where we met.
And he immediately began paying court to you?
Oh, heavens, no. Nobody seems to take much notice of me. I suppose that comes from having such a wildly attractive sister. That's why I was so surprised when he called a few weeks later. We began seeing a great deal of each other. We went on long carriage rides, had picnic lunches. It was all quite lovely. And then on the 5th of June, he declared his love for me and asked for my hand in marriage. I was so happy. I couldn't have killed him.
How do you explain your presence at Halliday's?
Well, I can't. It's just like the other 2 times.
You've had memory losses before.
Yes, twice in the past month. The first time I found myself atop a horse in Hyde Park, with no recollection of how I got there. The last thing I remember was having lunch with my sister Loretta. Then there I was, atop a chestnut mare.
How peculiar.
The funny thing is, I'm terrified of horses.
You mentioned there was a second time.
Yes, a few days later, I met with my solicitor, Hiram Davenport. Then the next thing I know, I'm at the Newgate Street station. I consulted my physician, Dr. Mason, and he was quite as baffled as I was.
One last question, if you will. What is your relationship with Gerald Locke?
Oh, Jerry, he's a dear old friend. Though I'm afraid we had a falling out of late. He said some very unkind words about Guy.
So, sorry to have kept you waiting, gentlemen. I assume you are inquiring about the Nolan girls.
Yes, we are. How long have you been their solicitor, Mr. Davenport?
Actually, in practice, I am serving that function only for Frances. Loretta has not sought a word of my advice since she came of age and was able legally to get her hands on her trust fund. Had Loretta the presence of mind to follow my good counsel, I'm certain she would be in a far better financial situation today.
Do you recall a meeting with Miss Frances last month when she blacked out?
Well, I did have a very odd meeting with both Miss Frances and Miss Loretta several weeks ago.
How so?
Well, I wouldn't say she blacked out as such, but she did leave rather unexpectedly. We were in the middle of our discussion when I was called out of the office. I was gone not more than 20 minutes. When I returned, Miss Frances had a very strange look in her eyes. She mumbled something and promptly left. Miss Loretta laughed that very disturbing laugh of hers and departed as well.
I question why we have come to this location. If clues are what we are seeking, then we are in the wrong place altogether.
This is a difficult thing for a man to say about his only son. But Guy was a wastrel and a ne'er-do-well. Only a short month or so ago, I gave him £5,000 and told him that was the last he'd see of my money. I'd hoped the shock would bring the boy around. Make him realize he had to settle down, instead of wasting his life on gambling and gallivanting around with that wild woman.
Which wild woman was that?
Loretta Nolan, of course.
You mentioned gambling, Sir Francis. Have you any idea with whom he gambled or who might have wanted to kill him?
I wish I did. He told us nothing. He only came around when he needed money. And when I told him there'd be no more, we never saw him. Just about broke his mother's heart. There, Gertie. We still have one another.
I've something you ought to know about Master Guy. One morning, rather early, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I heard a terrible clatter downstairs, so I came down to investigate. It was Master Guy just coming home. He was in a terrible state, all battered and bruised, with a fresh cut on his forehead. I asked him who did it to him, and he wouldn't say. I think he was afraid for his life.
Tell us, who was at home on the evening of the 1st?
Well, just Miss Frances, sir. Oh, yes, of course, and Dr. Trevelyan.
What time did the doctor take his leave?
Oh, let me think. It must have been 10 o'clock, because that's what time he always leaves.
What did Miss Frances do after her guest left?
What she does every evening, sir. Well, she asked for a cup of hot cocoa, which I brought her straight away. Then she read for a bit by the fire. Later, when I went up to bed, I passed her room, and the light went out.
What time would that have been?
Oh, let me see. Oh, I know it was 11:30 because the clock chimed. Then I went to sleep. Later, I was awakened in the middle of the night, right in the midst of the most peculiar dream. You see, I was barefoot and trying to buy a pair of shoes.
As fascinating as all this is, could we get back to what it was that awakened you?
Oh, yes, of course. Well, it was something that I heard, or thought I heard. I listened for a bit, but that was the end of it, so I went to sleep again. Later, I awoke at 7:30. I always wake up at 7:30, except, of course, on Sundays, when I sleep until 8. As usual, I began to prepare Miss Frances's breakfast. I had no sooner gotten to the kitchen when I heard the front door open and close. Well, I ran to the front window and peeked out, and there was Miss Frances walking down the street.
And why do you deem that so unusual?
Well, she never leaves before she's eaten one of my currant buns.
Doctor, we understand that you dined with Frances Nolan on the evening of July 1st.
Yes, that is correct. We dine every Sunday. Her sister Loretta has been under my care for some 10 years. First at the Mesmer Braid Institute and then in private practice.
Without breaching physician-patient protocol, would you mind telling us the nature of her illness?
She never quite recovered from the overwhelming trauma of watching her parents being blown to bits.
I quite understand.
As is often the case with young orphans, they tend to create fantasies about their parents. Miss Loretta Nolan truly believes that her father was the King of England, making her a princess.
Do you think her unconventional behavior stems from that fantasy?
Absolutely. As a princess, she believes she can do no wrong. I must say that she's worlds apart from her sister Frances.
Do you know Frances Nolan well?
Yes, rather. Through my treatment of her sister, I've known her for years. Let me say that it is difficult to believe that Miss Frances is capable of murder. She has a quiet, unassuming personality. An act of such direct confrontation would not be at all in keeping with her character.
Were Loretta and Frances close?
I know without a doubt that Miss Frances loves and cares for her sister,
almost as a parent would a child. Miss Loretta, well, she loves her sister as much as she is capable of love.
Enter and be recognized. Oh, you don't wish to play Her Majesty, eh? Very well.
You do not seem particularly disturbed by the recent turn of events, Miss Nolan.
Each of us grieves in his own way, Mr. Holmes.
It must be difficult for you to face the possibility that your own sister may have killed your dearest chum.
Guy was fun to be with. And as for Frances, I love her dearly, but, well, it's funny to think Miss Right and Proper has finally gotten herself into a bit of a jam.
Miss Nolan, may I ask, when was the last time you saw Guy Clarendon?
Let me think. I believe it was the Richmond's party last Thursday. Yes, I'm sure of it. God, we did cut it up a bit there.
And after the party?
We did not go home together, if that's what you're implying. That would have broken Frances's heart. She was head over heels for Guy, you know. She had some foolish notion that he was going to marry her. Not that someone like him ever would. But I do recall her saying, and it might have been the night of his death, that she was going to have a talk with him about their future.
Sure, I remember Clarendon. He and his lady friend used to stop in here from time to time, usually on their way to Kilgore's gaming parlor or coming back from it. Rumor has it, Clarendon was into Kilgore for a sizable sum.
Do you happen to know how much?
£7,000 was the figure I heard. Got to the point Kilgore wouldn't allow him in the door. Clarendon made a big fuss till Gus Bullock stepped in. Clarendon backed down pretty quick. Don't blame him none. Nobody in their right mind would want to mess with the likes of Gus.
Do you think Bullock was involved in the murder?
Nothing you could tell me about that bloke would surprise me. Anyways, Kilgore makes it clear to Clarendon that he wants his money. Then, a month or so later, Clarendon comes in all smiles, and he and Kilgore getting on like chums. Figure Clarendon must have paid him back. Then, Calvin Leach steps into the picture.
Now, who's Calvin Leach?
Leach deals in what you might call stolen property. Square dealer, too. Give you one half the value of the article.
What does Leach have to do with Clarendon and Kilgore?
Usually nothing at all. But there it is. Leach, Kilgore, and Clarendon meeting late at night just as thick as thieves. The meetings continued on right up to, well, the night before Clarendon's death.
Very interesting.
Now, we've been standing here jawing, and I don't recall hearing anybody order nothing. What'll it be, mate?
Mr. Clarendon appears to be a frequent depositor.
Yes, but it looks as if he's afraid the money will burn a hole in his bank book if he leaves it in too long.
Who are you and what do you want?
Dr. John Watson, sir. I wondered if you might be kind enough to answer a few questions.
About what?
Guy Clarendon.
That welching little weasel, what about him?
He's been murdered.
I'd say he got what he deserved. And if you don't clear out of here in 2 seconds, so will you.
Oh, quite. Ta-ta. You're quite sure the murder weapon was a small caliber pistol?
Quite. I'd also wager to say he'd been shot at very close range.
Ghastly.
Tell us, Sir Jasper, at what time did you receive the body?
Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
And how much time would you judge to have elapsed from the time of the murder?
Well, it's always difficult to be precise in these matters, but I'd venture to say he'd been dead anywhere from 4 to 10 hours.
Clarendon, poor chap. He arrived on the 29th day of May and was given a front room on the 3rd floor. 2 days later, he asked to be moved to suite 205.
To your knowledge, did he have any visitors?
Only 2 that I'm aware of. One was a most disagreeable fellow. He was rather large, had a thick walrus moustache, and a very prominent scar down his cheek. He arrived on the 1st of June, the very day of Mr. Clarendon's move. He simply came in, sat down in the lobby, and waited. 20 minutes or so later, Mr. Clarendon came down from his room. The big man yanked him aside. I was about to send for a bobby when Mr. Clarendon signed me that all was well. After a few minutes, they left together. I never saw the man again. His other visitor, who came by quite frequently, was a most striking woman. She was quite fashionably dressed. She had a most distinctive laugh, very full and deep. I've no idea who she was.
Please, tell us about the morning of July 2nd.
It was about 9 o'clock when a woman entered. She was rather plain-looking, and I wouldn't have noticed her, except for the fact that she came in the front door, looking neither left nor right, and proceeded directly up the staircase. It couldn't have been more than 30 seconds later when I heard a bang, followed by a woman's scream. I dashed upstairs to the 2nd floor. The door to room 205 was open. Inside, I found the body of Mr. Clarendon and the woman who'd just come up. She was lying in a swoon in the center of the room with a pistol in her hand. I revived her with some whiskey. When she came to, she was totally disoriented. She had no idea where she was or what she'd done. When she saw Clarendon's body, she let out a shriek and dropped the pistol. I summoned the police.
Tell me, at what hour are the hotel's front doors locked?
10 o'clock, sir. Anyone who arrives after that has to be let in by the night staff. Of course, Mr. Clarendon was never one of those. He was always in his room before 10.
May we see his room? What have we here, Watson? It appears to be a bank statement.
Look here, Holmes. It appears the maid missed a spot in her sweeping.
Good thing she did, Watson. You're staring at evidence.
Blood.
What's this stain here?
Smells like a fine sherry. Looks like someone's been celebrating.
The question is, was it with the body or over it?
Nothing much here. Couple of shirts and 3 pair of shoes.
But what you failed to notice, my dear Watson, is that one of the pairs of shoes is canvas and has been dyed black. Interesting. A sweater and trousers. An ensemble in black.
Not much of a view. All I can see is a brick wall of the building across the alley.
Ivy vines binding up a trellis.
I say, excuse me, Dr. Murray.
Hello, what? Oh, my, I must have dozed off. Ah, it's you, Whitson. And what are you doing with yourself this afternoon? Or is it evening already? Have I missed my tea?
It's Watson, sir. We're looking into the Clarendon case, and we were wondering...
Clarendon? Ah, I just finished that report when I dozed off. Let me see. Number 301, I believe. Ah, yes. Here it is. Number 103. Clarendon, Guy. Not much, I'm afraid. A hole in the shirt where a small caliber bullet passed into the body. Extensive blood stains. Powder burns indicating a close-range shot. Ah, here's something interesting. On the lower part of the shirt, I found traces of alcohol. Wine, to be exact. Now, I have a good nose for this sort of thing, and I believe it to be an inferior quality Italian red.
Do you remember a woman who came in recently and purchased a Derringer?
Oh, matter of fact, I do, sir. We don't get women in here very often, especially not alone. And I particularly remember that one because she was so pretty and, she looked like she really knew how to have a good time, if you'll pardon the expression.
Do you remember her name?
I should say I do. She repeated it twice whilst I was filling out the order form. Seems like it was very important to her that I get her name right. Let me see, it was, Frances, Les, well, it was Frances something or other, sir.
Queen's Court now stands in order. Mr. Holmes, I understand you've been looking into the murder of Guy Clarendon.
That is correct, my lord.
Would you be so kind as to tell the court who killed Mr. Clarendon?
Certainly, my lord.
I see. And what was Loretta Nolan's motive for killing Mr. Clarendon? Greed, pure and simple. Now, have you determined why Frances Nolan went to Halliday's?
I have, my lord.
Please inform the court. Not a sisterly thing to do at all. Is there anything else you wish to report to the court?
Yes, my lord. I believe we've also solved the case of the society burglar.
You don't say. Who is the guilty party? Guy Clarendon was straight from the upper crust. Why ever would he turn to a life of crime? Well done. I applaud your deductive skills. You will make a fine detective for Scotland Yard one day. However, you'll have to do much better if you wish to match the sleuthing expertise of Mr. Holmes.
Not bad, I dare say. We're not too far off, are we?
Well, Watson, we should be very pleased with ourselves on this one.
Yes, indeed, Holmes.
2 cases solved for Scotland Yard, though I doubt that Lestrade will consider himself in our debt.
2?
Yes, indeed. First, the society burglar. Clarendon was £7,000 in debt to the gambler Kilgore. Unfortunately, he was in his father's bad graces and he was flat broke.
Do you suppose Kilgore sent Bullock around to rough Clarendon up?
Good deduction, Watson. You're learning. That's why he moved into Halliday's, to escape Gus Bullock.
And to pay off his debts, he took to burglary.
Right you are. He acquired a black sweater, trousers, and a pair of black canvas shoes so as not to be seen or heard in the dead of night. He chose victims of his own class, whose social comings and goings he knew well, and whose homes he'd visited often.
I still don't understand why, after he'd settled in at Halliday's, he changed rooms.
Elementary, my dear Watson. To be at the back of the hotel with a vine-covered trellis conveniently leading in and out of his bedroom window.
Quite so. Positively clever of you.
May I continue?
Oh, please do.
On the 1st of June, Bullock tracked Clarendon down and confronted him in the lobby. Clarendon paid him the £5,000 that was given to him by his father.
But he still owed Kilgore £2,000. And that was the same evening the society burglar struck for the first time.
So pleased you've been paying attention, Watson. Soon after that, Clarendon, Kilgore, and Calvin Leach, a known trafficker in stolen goods, were seen together. Notice, if you will, that 1/2 the value of the first 3 society burglaries is equal to £2,000. Half the value being the price normally paid by Calvin Leach for stolen goods. Notice also that this same amount is equal to the balance of Clarendon's debt to Kilgore.
Fascinating. So with his new vocation, Clarendon now had an easy source of income.
Quite so, as his succeeding bank transactions evidence. On the day after each of the next 3 burglaries, Clarendon made deposits. Everything went along swimmingly, and by June 30th his debt was paid.
But the tiara was stolen July 1st.
Yes, Watson. Apparently young Clarendon thought he'd found himself a new vocation. He might have lasted longer at it if he'd chosen something else to steal.
Whatever do you mean, Holmes?
Loretta Nolan's delusion that she was born of royal parentage proved to be his undoing.
If she took it, how did she manage? No one saw her enter or leave.
She came and went the same way Clarendon did, via the trellis. She was armed with a derringer purchased at S. Goff's in her sister's name. Clarendon returned from his night's work and poured 2 glasses of wine in celebration. That's when Loretta Nolan shot him and took the tiara.
How wicked of her.
Not nearly as wicked as what she did next.
What?
She went to her sister Frances's home and hypnotized her. She then proceeded to instruct her to go to Clarendon's room with the derringer and fire it into the ceiling.
Incriminate her own sister? But why?
If we could determine that precisely, we could start our own institute.
Sick mind, no doubt. But tell me, Holmes, how did Clarendon know the precise locations of each of his victims' jewels?
Excellent question, Watson. Although there is no clear-cut evidence for this, I can only assume that Loretta Nolan must have been in on it too. The only way Clarendon could have known the locations of the jewels was if the victims themselves had told him where to look. None of them recalls having told anyone, but in fact they did tell someone.
Who?
Loretta Nolan. She managed to hypnotize each of the ladies whose jewels were stolen and got them to reveal the precise locations of the family treasures.
And left them with no memory of having done so.
Precisely.
Astounding, Holmes.
Elementary, my dear Watson.